Okay, so that's clear. There is a recording going on now. Right. So welcome everyone. My name is Ingemar Hunnings. I am giving this webinar to give you as much information as I can about the SQE, the new way that the SRA has for people qualifying as English and Welsh solicitors. I'm also going to focus a fair bit on qualifying work experience, as that's really quite different from how things were done before under the old LPC. So what I propose to do is explain a little bit about myself, how I've got into this, what my firm does. So there's a bit of background with regard to that. Then we're going to look at what the SQE is. We're going to look a bit about into what qualifying work experience is. And then we're going to go on to looking at exemptions, both for people who are unqualified and what's available to them, and for people who are foreign qualified lawyers. I'll do the best I can to answer and give as much clarity as I can. There's a big Q&A session at the end where people, if you write your questions in there, then I'll do my best to answer those. Afterwards, I will share probably onto LinkedIn, but if those people who we've contacted by email want it as well, then just email us. There'll be a link to a page on our website where you can access some of the links that I'm going to show you anyway. I will be using our website to go to the information because there's an awful lot on there. And so I think that's possibly the easiest way to do that. By the way, I will also be talking about apprenticeships for those people who are in England. They are available to a certain extent in Wales. I think Scotland has its own scheme. It's not available to people who are outside of the United Kingdom. Right, so a little bit about me. I'm a solicitor. I am on the current SRA roll. I was admitted in 1992. I spent 24 years in private practice. I was an equity partner for 10 years. I helped to run, well, I was the department head of a department of 60 litigators. I was also on the board. So that's my professional career. Then I'm going to start sharing my screen. So let's take that off there. No matter how well you prepare your screen, you end up with other things coming into it. Wonderful. So there we go. Right. Okay. So this is our firm, HCL, Hunnings Consultancy. And what we are is a one-stop shop for business support. Okay. So law firms particularly, but some other businesses as well. We're a management consultancy. And we do an awful lot of compliance support, mostly for SRA regulated firms, but also we do other things that affect other firms like data protection. We have a data protection officer service and such like. And we do a lot of other work, consulting work for law firms, helping setting up law firms, supporting a couple of case management systems, quality marks like Lexel, CQS, Legal Aid, even supporting people offered partnership, but then an awful lot of work around people who want to qualify as solicitors under the SQE route. So how did I get into that and why is it relevant? Well, the acquisition of talent for law firms is really important, so that's how it ties in. We have well over 500 law firms as clients. Back in the summer of 2020, one of those firms reached out to me. It was actually a firm of paralegals, and the owner wanted to qualify as an English solicitor. And he said, look, there's this new way of qualifying coming along called the SQE. And it looks as though it's more flexible. It looks as though you can reach out to an external confirming solicitor to confirm your qualifying work experience, which is one of the elements required to qualify under the SQE route. And so he reached out to me because he was a paralegal, and I then started making inquiries with the SRA as to what this all was, worked closely with the SRA to see if my understanding of how to do this was correct. They were happy with it. And since then, I have developed a service. We have confirmed the qualifying work experience of 50 aspiring solicitors so far across the world. I think I'm still the only person providing that service as an external confirming solicitor. Also, I've been dragged into, and I would say dragged into because it wasn't my aim, to helping foreign qualified lawyers with applying for SQE2 exemptions. So that is there as well. So that's a little bit of the background as to why I am in this space. Right, so just to say also that the SRA are aware of what we're doing. They've even been on the website and asked us to change some of the wording around this. So not that they endorse us, but they're fully aware that we are doing this work, and I hope it is of help to people. I do a webinar like this every couple of months or so, and we put out an awful lot of information, and you can see that there's lots of stuff in the blog. Now, I'm going to be using this in this webinar, and as I said, the links I will put onto a post in LinkedIn, possibly on the, I'll do a separate post, I think, because the posts on LinkedIn are so full. And if people have come to us through WhatsApp or other methods, so that we've sent out the link via an email, then message us and we can send you the link for that from there as well. I see that there are questions. Okay, there's a question here which is a general one. I'm not going to try and go into the questions too much, but SRA stands for Solicitors Regulation Authority. So that's the regulation authority for solicitors of England and Wales, and it's them who administer the method for people qualifying as solicitors. So it's a very specific term. If you are qualified in Scotland, that is not, the SRA is not your regulatory body. Same for Northern Ireland. SQE, I think, stands for Solicitor's Qualification Exam or something like that. Right, okay, so in order to, well, let's go back a little bit. The way that you could qualify in the past as an English solicitor was called the LPC route. That's been around for quite some time. It wasn't particularly fit for purpose. For example, somewhere between 20 to 40% of people who passed the LPC exam were never able to find a training contract. And so they couldn't qualify, because you had to get a training contract which was run by the law firm under the auspices of the SRA before you could qualify. Also, no one ever failed a training contract, so it wasn't very rigorous anyway. Anyway, whatever the situation is, the SRA brought out a new way to qualify, which was operational from September 2021, which is the SQE route, and that is taking over from the LPC route. And for example, for foreign lawyers, the ability to qualify through the QLTS route was, QLTS was finished. That was stopped straight away. So we're in this transition period, and we already have got to the stage where people starting to do a degree cannot now go down the LPC route. So what is the okay. I'll talk about funding arrangements as I go along. I'm not an expert on scholarships. That would be the particular organization offering scholarships. I'm afraid I'm not an expert on that. Okay, going back to what is required to qualify as an English and Welsh solicitor, or a solicitor of England and Wales through the SQE route. Well, there are 4 elements, okay? 4 elements that need to be satisfied. There may be some exemptions from those, but I'll just talk about the basic situation to start off with. So first of all, you need to have a degree or degree equivalent. Under the LPC route, it had to be a law degree. Under the SQE route, it does not need to be a law degree. It is just a degree or degree equivalent. So much more flexible. Now, there's an article or blog on the website here where I have digested what the SRA say about it. There's a link to the SRA page. The SRA probably will require you to validate the degree or degree equivalent. And remember, we're talking globally here. And this is where you can go to access that. Okay. So, by the way, the website, hunningsconsultancy.co.uk, you can search for information in here. And that's how I brought this up. I searched on degree. There's my article about the degree where you can see that you have a link to where you can use this organization, Atlantic Data, and what have you, to do the validation. Okay, so that's element one. You need a degree or degree equivalent. The second element, if I go into here, there's an article, what is the SQE exam? So the second element is the exams. So degree, you have to pass the exams is the second element. Now the SRA has taken back control and responsibility for saying who should be let loose on the public as a qualified solicitor. So instead of law firms doing that, it will be the SRA through you passing the exams. Then there's SQE1 and SQE2. The third element is qualifying work experience, which I'll talk more about in a moment. And then the fourth element is that you have to sign some sort of declaration of good standing, and they will check, you'll do a DRB check, so you're check that you're not a terrorist or a child menacer or something like that. So that's between you and the SRA. Okay. Now then, the exams. So the first exam is the SQE1, and then we have the SQE2. The SQE1 is 2 exams, each 180 multiple choice questions, 10 hours of exam time. So it's multiple choice and is covering your knowledge of the law in these areas here. Strangely, it doesn't include family or immigration law, but it is what it is. I don't write the exams. So there's a cost to it. That was the cost as of then. I think it's still roughly in that area. Now, the exams are tough. The SQE1 exam has been sat twice so far. We've got the results for them out, both of those. Of the people who sat the SQE1, the percentage who passed is roughly about 55%, so slightly less than the LPC percentage who passed the LPC. And it's very, very granular. So people who've sat it have told me that, it's down to the detail of saying, right, in this scenario, what part of what page or what form do you have to fill in? So really, really granular. So it is sat in the Pearson View Centres in the UK and internationally. Now, there's not enough coverage internationally, but it does mean that you don't necessarily have to travel to the UK. There should be somewhere closer to you that you can travel to sit the exam. So that's the SQE1 exam. The second exam is the SQE2. And this is 16 written and oral tests, 14 hours of exam time. So it's over a couple of days or so. And it's 12 written and 4 oral exams. And what they're doing is they are testing to see if they think you're fit to be let loose on the public as a qualified solicitor. So it's real life scenarios where they're looking for you not only applying your correct knowledge of the law, but how you do it as well. So it's testing you on the soft skills as well, as you can see down here. And the qualifying work experience is preparation for this. So I'll come to QWE in a moment, but just mentioning that. Now, I remember one person telling me about the scenario of, I'm just going to close my emails now so that that's not interfering with us. So SQE2, this person was in a real life simulated scenario of a court hearing. The judge interrupted her. The clients didn't cooperate, and she was shocked by that. Sorry, girl, that's real life. So expect that in the exams. Now, the SQE2 exams have been sat twice so far. We've had the results from the first, but not the second. Of the people who sat the first SQE2 exam, 77% passed. Okay, so just a little bit of context on that. Now, I'm not an examiner. You know, don't have any particular insight into this. What I can do is draw your attention to the fact that we put a page on the website of SQE SQE training providers. Now, there are more than there were for the LPC. There is a list just on the SRA website. What we've done here is we've put in the main non-university providers with a little bit of guidance on this as to the background, indicative costs that we saw from the website, which was a little way back, but you'll need to check it all out here and the link. So please do use this as a resource. It's just a resource page, but notice the cost that they're charging is wildly different depending upon different providers. And at the moment, none can say one is better than the other. So that's there just as a resource for you. And so there you go. Right, so yes, I'm going to cover exemptions later on in the talk. Right, so we've got the two exams. We'll be talking about exemptions from the exams a little bit later. So we talked about there are 4 elements to pass to be qualified through the SQE route: the having a degree or degree equivalent, passing the exams, qualifying work experience, and the statement of your good character at the end of it all. What I want to do now is touch on or go through in a little bit of detail the element that I have not talked about yet, which is the qualifying work experience, and which often causes confusion. So you have to have 2 years full-time equivalent qualifying work experience, which needs to be confirmed to the SRA by an SRA regulated solicitor. Okay. So the qualifying work experience, full-time equivalent, the SRA doesn't define that. So they leave it down to the judgment of the confirming solicitor. And it's important that it is an SRA regulated solicitor, because then they can check that we're not cheating or what have you. So it's no good going to a barrister, a legal executive, or a foreign qualified lawyer, because they're not regulated by the SRA. And so that they cannot confirm your qualifying work experience. In my view, and it's only relevant to those people for whom I am the confirming solicitor, full-time is 30 to 35 hours plus a week. But most people will go and get their qualifying work experience confirmed by a solicitor in their organization. And then it's their judgment rather than mine that counts. Okay. The SRA has defined qualifying work experience, but all they've said is that qualifying work experience needs to be the provision of legal services. Beyond that, they've not gone very far in the definition, other than to say that qualifying work experience does not need to be done in a law firm, does not need to be done in English and Welsh law, does not need to be done in England and Wales. It could even be voluntary, and you can reach back in time as far as you want for your qualifying work experience. And you can have an external solicitor confirming the qualifying work experience. And what I would normally say is, if there's no one in your firm who is able to do that or is willing to do that. So there we go. Where we do it, we do charge. Because we've got to put bread on the table much as anyone else. So I always offer a free, no obligation Zoom for someone who is looking to have their QWE confirmed, to make sure it is still appropriate, make sure there isn't someone in their organization who could or should be doing that. There are issues around solicitors not or refusing to do that for no good reason, in which case the SRA has said that they want to know. It becomes a disciplinary issue, and some of you may have seen me blogging on that on LinkedIn, and indeed I've had the SRA commenting to support me on that as well. Right, so qualifying work experience is a fairly easy, quick process to confirm that if it is a solicitor in your own organization that's doing it. If it's an external, then there's a bit more that needs to be done, because of course they don't know, haven't seen the work and such like. So that's qualifying work experience. The qualifying work experience, by the way, is prepped for your SQE too. It's the soft skills that you would acquire for being a solicitor. So that's what you're going to be tested on partially in the SQE2 exam. The SRA wants to make sure that you do have the skills to be an effective solicitor. Okay, so those are the 4 elements for qualifying through the SQE route. There are people who are now qualified as solicitors who've gone through the SQE route. I expect us to reach a tipping point within the next 12 to 18 months when more people are going to be going through the SQE route than the LPC route. As that gradually withers, many law firms are not up to speed on this at all, and it's going to catch them unawares. I'm just going to pause for a second to skim through the new things on the chat to make sure there's nothing relevant to what I've said before. There's a question: can you apply for the character and suitability requirements to the SRA to be sorted before you finish your 2 years QWE? I suspect you can, but it's unlikely for that to happen. I don't know the answer to that because I'm not involved in that. Right, a couple of questions about QWE. What I'm going to do, yeah, there's some more detailed questions about QWE, which I'm going to pick up then when we come to the Q&A session, because there's usually loads of questions on that, because it's something where the SRA has very purposefully not tried to be too prescriptive, because the provision of legal services actually is very, very broad in its in how that happens. And of course, you've got the externals as well. So to a large extent now, I'm going to ignore the chat, the questions going in there, and pick them at the end, pick them up at the end when we get to the Q&A session, and I'll just work my way down them. Okay. So we talked about qualifying work experience. Right. So let's start to talk about, well, before I do that, the next thing I want to mention actually is apprenticeships. Now, this is specific to particularly English, also Welsh, not really Scottish, but there may be things developing there. Certainly not people who are outside of the United Kingdom. I don't know the position in Northern Ireland, sorry. So the SRA was very careful to design the SQE to work with the government's apprenticeship scheme. Now, the government's apprenticeship scheme has been around for decades, but the fact that lawyers or aspiring solicitors, let's say that, can avail themselves of this is brand new. Now, the benefit, if you can go in as an apprentice, and we're talking graduate apprentice here, we're not talking school leaver, graduate apprentice, is that the government and your employer will pay all of your tuition costs and all of your exam costs. So you save yourself thousands of pounds. There is an article on here on the website, so just search on apprenticeship and you'll find it in there, where I put all of my research into this. You would be taken on as an employee by your employer, and it would be up to them to put you on as an apprentice. This is a graduate apprentice, okay? They have to do that through one of the training providers, and the training providers are those listed on the approved spreadsheet for training providers. And be aware, of course, that there'll be many training providers, you know, for plumbers, for plasterers, for all sorts of types of apprentices, but now that includes also aspiring solicitors. The approved list was locked or shut for new applicants when we had the COVID lockdown, and the government hasn't opened it up again yet, which I think is crazy, hugely anti-competitive. So as far as I'm aware, it's still locked. And so it was those people who were already on there, which is just the University of Law and BPP, who actually are also the most expensive, but that's a problem for the taxpayer. But your employer would need to approach one of those, BPP or the University of Law, to ask them to then take them through the process to put you on as an apprentice for your SQE study and exams. I do have a contact at the University of Law, I don't at BPP. So if that's something that's of potential interest, do have a look at this. Feel free to reach out. Happy to do a webinar to educate your employers. I've done quite a few of those. There's a huge lack of understanding on this, but you can see this is happening. So I think I mentioned in here about the BBC, and this is in-house paralegals who they're putting on to on as graduate legal apprenticeships. So there we go. So that's apprenticeships, certainly something that's worth thinking about if you're in the UK. Right, exemptions. That's what lots of you want to hear about. If you are not an undergraduate, if you're an aspiring solicitor who's not qualified as a lawyer overseas, so you're an aspiring solicitor, paralegal, and you passed your LPC, the SRA will give you, I'm pretty close to saying will give you exemption from the SQE1. I think you have to still ask for it, but they will exempt you from your SQE1 exam. And so you're left then in that situation with having to have your QWE confirmed. And by the way, the 2 years qualifying work experience that you need to have confirmed is a minimum. If you have more, it's not a problem. And you have up to 4, but no more than 4 placements within which to get your QWE. So if you have, 2 weeks internship, I wouldn't bother. You want a significant chunk because it's a question of maths as to how you get your minimum 2 years QWE built up through up to 4 placements. So if you're an English, or if you're a paralegal who has passed their LPC, you're likely to get exemption from your SQE1. You'll have to sit your SQE2, and you will need to get your QWE confirmed. Right. So that's fairly straightforward for people who are not qualified. Now, some people have asked me, okay, can I get exemption from SQE2 as well? You can apply. The form that I'm aware of is really for foreign qualified lawyers. So the only route that I can think of is by going down the equivalent means route, which really is a hangover from the LPC days. The SRA are very, well, let's put it this way, they are not keen to give people exemption from both the SQE1 and the SQE2. If you're going down the equivalent means route, it's a huge form which you have to fill in. You put together a big dossier of evidence, and you have to persuade them that you have experience to quite a deep level in many practice areas. So crime, property, private client, corporate, it's very unlikely you're going to have all those. And you pay £600 and you wait for 6 months for them to review it. So the equivalent means, you might ask me about it. I wouldn't say it's worth it. You might as well sit the exam. Okay, so that's paralegals, people who are unqualified. Now then, foreign qualified lawyers. I know I've got quite a few on here, and you want to know about exemptions. And it's a little complicated. There's not a lot of, well, there is information out there, but it's not very easy to pull it together. There is an article I've put on here, quite a long one, where I pulled my knowledge together as of that stage, how to qualify as an English solicitor, some guidance for foreign qualified lawyers. So yeah, enjoy the read. There we go. Foreign qualified lawyers. It used to be that you could use you would qualify through the QLTS route. That finished when the SQE was brought in September 2021. So foreign qualified lawyers can qualify through the SQE. You will be exempt from the QWE requirement. so long as you have practiced after qualifying, and really they're looking for you having practiced for 2 years plus. Okay, so then we're looking at you've got the degree requirement, okay, which someone's joined and they've got their audio on. Please could I ask you to turn the audio off? We have a lot of people on here and we can't have the audio on for everyone. It would just be a cacophony. 1 plus 8T. Please could you mute yourself? Right, I will force mute you. There we go. Okay, so foreign qualified lawyers, you're exempt from the SQE, from the QWE element with that proviso. So can you get exemption from SQE1 and SQE2? Again, the SRA do not like giving exemption from both, so it's an either or. The SQE1 exemption is quite detailed. You have a lot of information to fill in on the appropriate form. No, that's a different one. Okay, there is stuff on the website. If I go back into here, SQE2 exemptions, where I've actually put all the information about applying for exemptions in here, together with the form that you can download and such like. There it is, and such like. So foreign qualified lawyers, yes, you can apply for exemption from SQE1. I think it's unlikely you're going to get it, and it's going to be a lot of hard work. Again, a big dossier of evidence. You're much more likely to get exemption from SQE2. SQE2, because you've already been practicing, so that's why you're exempt from the QWE, and the SQE2 because that's testing you on the application of your knowledge. Now, I'm not going to go into all the detail here, but SQE2, there's a form you fill in, and it's really quite simple. If your 2 years professional legal work experience was gained as part of your qualification. So for example, in South Africa, I think it's similar to the old LPC route here that you have to do 2 years of training contract before you qualify, in which case it's very simple. You fill in a very simple section of 7A of that form, and you upload the form to your My SRA profile on the SRA website, pay the money, and the SRA will check with the local bar or law society, and that validates that, and off you go. Obviously, you have to fill in sections 1 to 4 of the form as well, which is saying who you are and what you do, that sort of thing. Very simple. If your 2 years professional legal experience was gained after qualification, then you fill in section 7B, and you need to get a letter of reference written by your referee or the referees that you had covering the periods of work that made up that 2-year period. You need to provide a certificate of good standing from your local bar or law society, and that for the supervisor as well, if they are a qualified lawyer. If they're not, the SRA have said, well, you need to explain why they were suitably qualified to supervise you, and whatever you can get together, maybe qualifications or such like for that supervisor. They're just checking, okay? Then you upload the form together with the fee and such like. If your 2 years professional legal experience is a combination of during your qualification, as part of your qualification and afterwards, then it's section 7C, pretty much otherwise similar to 7B. And section 8 is if you are a foreign qualified lawyer with less than 2 years legal work experience, and you've got quite a lot of information then to put together to justify why you should be exempted. I would say probably carry on working until you get to being able to use 7B. So that's applying for exemption from the SQE2 exam. You are already exempt from the QWE. Now, there are some wrinkles with regards to these. First of all, just recently, I got a letter from the SRA for those people who are foreign qualified lawyers, where the legal system derives from the Soviet Union, Warsaw Pact, that sort of thing. So I know it's relevant to foreign qualified lawyers who qualified in Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. It may be other countries as well. They've recently, well, let's go back. The legal system there, as it's been explained to me, is that you have two tiers of lawyers. You have those who pass their law degree and then they're allowed to practice, and they're called lawyers, but there is no professional body for them. But then there's a second group of people who pass further exams and are called advocates, and there is a professional body for them. So the question was, how on earth do we get a certificate of suitability from where there's no body to ask? And the SRA has given some guidance, which you'll find just at the top here. I've copied and pasted it into the blog here, but it seems as though they're quite flexible. You provide what evidence you can with regard to that. So where we find things out, we'll put them up here to give guidance. Okay. Now then, LPC. So this is a wrinkle, and some of these things I think personally the SRA hadn't thought them through before this all happened. If you are a foreign qualified lawyer and you had passed the LPC exam, then you've got two options. You register and sit the SQE2, prove that you passed the LPC, which shouldn't be difficult, and you got to do the 2 years full-time equivalent qualifying work experience. I said there was two options. That is not two options. That is what they say you have to do. So it's one of the weird situations where a foreign qualified lawyer still needs to have their QWE confirmed by an SRA regulated solicitor. So that is if you're a foreign qualified lawyer who's sat and passed the LPC. That's the route forward for you there. QLTS, if you are in the process of qualifying as a solicitor of England and Wales through the QLTS, of course, that's now been scrapped. So you passed your MCT, but you haven't passed the OSCE. Quotes, because I got this from the SRA, there are two routes that you have to follow. Either the QLTS transitional route or the SQE qualification route. So in summary, either you take and pass the SQE2 and apply for admission, or you take and pass SQE1, and then you're exempt from the QWE requirement, and you sit and pass the SQE2, but you're more likely to get exemption from that. Now, there is a time limit, I think, for the first one, the transitional route. Okay, so if you are just sitting the SQE2, you must have applied for admission by the 31st of March 2024. So that means sitting the SQE2, getting the results, and applying for admission. Bearing in mind that the SQE2 exam happens twice a year, no more frequently than that, and it takes quite a few months to get the results through. There is a clock ticking for that. So if you're in that position, having passed the MCT but not the OSCE, do think about that quite carefully, because there's a clock ticking for you. Right. Non-law graduates. Just in case someone like BPP says, oh, you've got to sit another course, you don't. The GDL is not required for the SQE. Okay, period. So if BPP is saying you got to pay X £1,000 to do a converter course, fine. If you want to use BPP, then you've chosen to be bound by what they say, but that's not required by the SRA. So there are other training providers out there, as I mentioned, okay, who won't require you to do that. Now, I understand why the BPP are doing that, because they want to make sure their pass rates are as high as possible. It's in your it's your choice, however, as to if you haven't got a law degree, you might want to put the extra work in yourself to learn the basics to push forwards. Whether you're pushed, you feel you want to do a separate course on that, that's your choice. Okay. I've got someone with the volume on, so could I please ask you to put yourself on mute? Thank you very much. Okay, so I've gone through what I wanted to go through with regard to explaining about the SQE route, qualifying work experience, and the exemptions. What I'm going to do now is turn to the questions on here and see if I can answer as many of those as possible. Now, please bear in mind that I'm a private individual, working in my law firm. I am not the SRA. So ultimately, the SRA has the answers. Bless them. Sometimes the people in the SRA seem to get a bit confused. So there we go. Right, let me work my way through the questions. I told you what SQE and SRA stands for. Towards the end of the webinar, could you please talk a little bit about scholarships, alternative funding arrangements for the SQE exams? I can't really say much about scholarships. I've talked about apprenticeships. That's about as much as I know, to be honest, with regard to that. Whether your employer decides to give you a little bit of money towards it, good luck. But the idea is, as you may have seen from the pricing down here, that the study costs are a good bit lower, depending on who you choose, than the, let's move that away to one side, than they were under the LPC. And there is for English and Welsh citizens the ability to avail yourself of the apprenticeship scheme. Not available for foreign qualified lawyers because it's the British taxpayer that's paying for it. Right, so here we go, the next one here. Ingemar, I passed my MCT, suppose would I be exempt from the SQE1? I qualified in India, but my professional experience has been in England. Would that amount to exemption? Okay, would you be able to help me here? So I've gone through the situation with passing the MCT, but not the OSCE. If you remember, that was QLTS up here, so please refer to that. Professional experience, so this is a good question and applies across the board for foreign qualified lawyers. Professional legal experience can be obtained anywhere. It just needs to be professional legal experience. So whether it was in India or in England, there's no benefit to it being in one place or another. The SRA are just applying the rule. It's not that you're more favoured because it was in England. That's not relevant. Similarly, your supervisor, by the way, for those people who would need to have a letter of reference from the supervisor. And by the way, in the blog on the website there, I've really repeated the guidance that the SRA has said as to what they want in that letter of reference. The referee just needs to be the person who was supervising you. Doesn't need to be in England or in Wales. Now, their certificate of good standing you would get from their local bar. If they were in England, you don't need to get one. You just need to give the SRA their SRA number because the SRA can check their own records. Right. Are there any exemptions given to Indian lawyers with 1 to 2 years experience? Is it an automatic exemption, or it has to be requested from the request to the SRA? It'll be their decision on a case-by-case basis. It will be their decision on a case-by-case basis, applying through, where was it in here? The form in here. So exemptions in general. And if I were to hit this is the form. So hold on a moment, let's minimize this for a second. So that's the form, okay. And you don't need 1 to 4 you need to fill in. 5 and 6 you don't, unless you're applying for exemption from SQE1, which I wouldn't recommend. And so you're just going down to section 7, wherever that was down here. What I got there, section 7 there, you can see 7A is really simple. 7B is pretty simple. 7C similarly. 8, you need to do more work, but I can't imagine really anyone choosing to use number 8, to be honest. Right. I'm going to struggle here finding where I was if I go off screen. Right. Can you apply for character and suitability requirements to the SRA prior to finishing 2 years QWE? I don't know the answer to that. I suspect they may want to do it right at the end. That is a question for the SRA, I'm afraid. I work for the Citizens Advice. Would this count as QWE? Potentially, yes. The SRA actually gave that as an example of QWE, but it does depend not on your role, but or title, but what you're doing. So if you were a debt advisor, and by the way, I am a trustee of a Citizens Advice, a debt advisor probably is not providing legal services, but perhaps financial services. So I would question that. But if you're a general advisor who's giving advice on housing law, immigration law, domestic abuse law, and things like that, yes, it would. So it is very much, it's fairly granular as to what you're actually doing. So that's why I always have to speak to the person to get an idea and form an opinion as to whether it actually is qualifying work experience. And I've turned down someone, for example, from Pakistan, I remember, who had 5 years experience working in a court, but he was preparing the papers for the judges. Now that was the provision of administrative services, not legal. He wasn't involved in interpreting, advising on the law or things like that, drafting contracts at all. All right, can only one reference be shared, and that too from the latest supervisor, a solicitor in my organization? And if there is over 1 year of work experience with this supervisor, but more than 10 years work experience overall, can the reference still serve to attest my work experience? So I imagine Andrea is a foreign qualified lawyer who's asking this with regard to an exemption from SQE 2. Then if it's one placement, my view, and I'm not the SRA, is that yes, that would be okay. It's the latest supervisor who can say that they supervised your work during that period. It might be that the SRA comes back and says, can we have a letter of reference from the other one? This is different from qualifying work experience. This is, I think Andrea is saying, as a foreign qualified lawyer applying for exemption from SQE2. So you can see this is all quite technical as to who you are and where you're coming from. SEMA, soft skills includes what was listed, SEMA. If I bring this up here, if your question, SEMA, is about foreign qualified lawyers, then that's not really so relevant. They just want to know that you've been doing relevant work, providing legal services. If it is to do with QWE, then it's the list here of soft skills that the SRA has put in their suggested form. So acting honestly, maintaining your legal knowledge, knowing when you need to seek assistance or supervision, how to gather information, applying your critical knowledge and understanding. So this is the sort of stuff that I have to go through when I'm helping helping people confirm their qualifying work experience. Drafting documents, advocacy, negotiating, planning your work. So these soft sort of skills in here. Right, Armila, for how long should one prepare for the SQE1 and SQE2 exams before taking the exams? I really can't answer that, Armila, because it depends upon the candidate and the training provider, and of course then when the exams happen before. Sorry about that. So the next one, what exemptions can you potentially get if you're a Nigerian qualified lawyer with 1 to 2 years experience and you passed your LPC? I think I've already covered that. So LPC, you can apply for exemption from your SQE1. There was a particular screen I had here. Let's bring that back up here for those who had passed their. Those people joining, can you please make sure that you are on a mute, please? Yeah, pass the LPC. So there was that screen in there. So you've got to sit and pass the SQE2, prove you passed your LPC, 2 years full-time equivalent. Okay. You can try and apply for the exemption from the SQE2. But if they give you, you're asking for exemption from SQE1 as well, they might not give that to you. It's going to be in the gift of the SRA on that one because they don't like exempting people from both exams. If it's 1 to 2 years post-qualification experience, I would get you 2 years before going too far down the road on this. By the way, if I had a chap from qualified in New York, as soon as he qualified, he went off and he was a freelance lawyer with no supervisor. The SRA said, well, you can't get a letter of reference, so therefore you cannot get exemption from SQE2. So it is what it says. What's the difference between SILEX and the SQE, as both need QWE and exams? SILEX is a different regulatory body from the SRA. So SILEX, they have their own exams. There's a lot of similarity, but if you're qualified as a legal executive, so that's what this is, SILEX here, then you're qualified as a legal executive. You're not qualified as a solicitor. And people have asked me about helping them with confirming QWE for SILEX, but actually what one would have to be is the supervisor in order to be able to confirm QWE under SILEX. And I've spoken to the people, they're based in Bedford, that's not too far from where I'm based. And yeah, so I cannot act as an external confirming solicitor for QWE under the SILEX route. So sorry to be quite technical when you ask the question, so there you go. Right, so I've got Sonia. So apparently we have to pay a little extra for getting our qualifications checked for exemption. It looks like that. Double check with the SRA. I put onto the website there how you can do it, or you can click through the link I put to the SRA page on there to double check that. And I guess if you look at it from the SRA's point of view, they've got qualifications from around the world. And they're not experts on legal qualifications in every jurisdiction in the world. So they're using an organization which specializes in that to give some equivalency on that. What about jurisdictions where there is no regulatory body and there is no certificate of good standing which can be obtained? Okay, Olga, so I've answered that question with regard to those countries which seem to have their legal professions based upon the ex-Soviet model. So I've got a specific answer for that from the SRA, which, as I've shown you, is on the website. Beyond that, it's a question of asking the SRA, but maybe that's an indicative, an indication of what the SRA's approach would be. Mark Anthony, for SQE2 reference, what does the reference letter need to include? Okay, so where did I put it on here? So I put some guidance in here. So we'll open that up here. And basically, I've taken it from the SRA website and also had a chat with them. So it's pretty clear and straightforward in there. So, okay, you can get that from the SRA, but you can also just download it from the article on our website. And I try and give foreign qualified lawyers every assistance to do this themselves. If they really insist they want our help, then we will help with that, but charge you for the help on that. Have a look at the article on the website for that, Mark Anthony. Samuel, thank you. Oh, that's good. Seema, is there a way through which experienced Indian lawyers can associate with law firms or lawyers? So if you're talking about without qualifying as an English solicitor, there will be, but that's not the topic of this webinar. You can register as a RFL, so registered foreign lawyer with through the SRA, which doesn't involve you having to cross qualify. And obviously the law firm in England can hire you to work for them. That's a commercial question between you and them. Okay, in Greece, we have approximately 1.5 years of qualification experience, and then we give exams to qualify. I did an additional half year in the UK, and then I did the exams, 2 years total. Shall I go for 7B or 7C? Sounds like 7C there, because 1.5 was as part of your qualification, and 0.5 was post-qualification. Right, Mario, if someone has a bachelor's degree from an overseas university and a postgraduate degree from the UK, who is also a foreign qualified lawyer with more than 2 years experience, does he or she need to apply for to Exis to get the equivalence of his degree registered for SQE1, apply for exemption from SQE2? I think you still need to have them validated, double check with the SRA, because I put up what I know, but I'm not an expert on that. Yeah, then you probably would sit the SQE1, apply for exemption from SQE2, Mario, is my guess there. Shivani, can anyone apply for SQE2 exemption before sitting the SQE, or can one apply for SQE2 exemption before sitting the SQE1? Yes. Similarly, I didn't say this earlier, you can have your QWE confirmed before you start any exams, during the exams, or after the exams, just so long as it's done before you applying to be accepted as a qualified solicitor. And so it goes with applying for the exemption. And indeed, you might want to do that to know the way ahead. So good question, Shivani. Thank you. As a foreign qualified lawyer, are we allowed to apply for an exemption from the SQE2 before sitting? Yes, we just answered that, Mario. I think if yes, from the moment that we get approval regarding the SQE2 exam, is there a deadline for sitting the SQE1? I don't think so. Does working as a paralegal compliance officer qualify for QWE? But we're going to get more questions on QWE, or it depends on the specifics of your work. It does definitely depend upon the specifics of your work. So I'll give you some examples. I had someone, I think he was working at Denton's in their Hong Kong office, who was a conflicts consultant. What on earth is a conflicts consultant? It turns out that because it's a global firm, if someone in Hong Kong wants to take on a client, they need to check all of their databases to make sure that no one else is representing the other side somewhere else. Well, that's not the provision of legal services. That's the provision of administrative services or commercial services, but there's no law involved in that. If there was law involved, let's say someone working with compliance, the anti-money laundering legislation, or data protection legislation, that's legislation, and therefore it's a provision of legal services. So it very much depends upon what the person is doing. And similarly, the calculation of whether it's full-time, in my opinion, if someone's doing 80%, let's make the maths easy, 50% KYC conflict stuff, and then 50% is to do with anti-money laundering and all this sort of stuff, then you might say, right, that's 50% of your time is QWE. It's going to take you 4 years to get 2 years full-time equivalent. So that's the sort of thinking that I go through with regard to this. Obviously, it's up to the judgment of the confirming solicitor. So it is digging into the nature of the work you're doing, not the title, the nature. Okay, Emily, I am a knowledge paralegal in financial services. I predominantly work on the research side of legal services. It's necessary to carry out different legal services to meet criteria for exemption, example litigation. So this is a QWE question, I think, Emily. So the fact that you work in a financial services business or insurance business or any other business doesn't matter. It's about whether it is the provision of legal services. So you need to have someone to whom you can provide the legal services, but that can be your employer, so in-house is fine. And then it could well be that you're working in, I've got some people who work in the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, that's a regulatory body. As long as it's you're providing legal services, so you're working with law, and it could be financial law, it's law, the provision of legal services, then it potentially is the qualifying work experience, in my view. And then it gets down to the nitty-gritty of what you're actually doing. So you could be working as, let's say, an underwriter in an insurance company, and you are, yes, you're taking information in, then you're looking at the relevant legislation in the relevant jurisdiction, you're drafting contracts, you're negotiating over the contracts with your client before then signing the deal. Now, tell me how that's different from corporate work, corporate legal work. It is legal work. So I would regard that as being the provision of legal services. Fiona, how far back can you go for your QWE when applying for exception? You mean for it to be confirmed? As far back as you want is what the SRA says, but you've got to find either the supervisor supervising solicitor who was supervising you. By the way, they don't still need to be in the organization. They don't even need still to be working, but they do need to be still regulated by the SRA. So they should be on the roll. That's that. Often it's if you can't find them, and if you go into an external confirming solicitor, I find that the problem is that they've got to show me the evidence and they can't get access to it because the emails have been archived, the company doesn't exist any longer, or can't get the information to show me. So there's practical considerations, but in there's nothing to stop from a regulatory point of view. One thing I would say with people who are working is that if you are going to leave a position where you believe you have acquired qualifying work experience, get it confirmed before you leave, because it's much more difficult to get it confirmed after you've left, because they may archive everything that involves you, or they just may not wish to be cooperative. Right, is there an application for exemption from QWE, or is it an automatic exemption which is applied to foreign qualified lawyers? It's an automatic exemption for foreign qualified lawyers. I would caveat that, however, that if you just qualified, let's say, in Nigeria, Bahrain, or whatever, if you want to apply for exemption from SQE2, you need to have 2 years qualifying work, effectively qualifying work experience, experience as a lawyer. So I would say that you need to actually have practiced as a foreign qualified lawyer for this to be relevant. But the exemption from QWE is automatic. Samuel, how can I access your written explanation? If you're referring to the stuff on the website, go to hunningsconsultancy.co.uk and search for it. You can access that anywhere in the world. It's just on the internet. Thank you. OnePlus. Whether in-house legal work experience equals QWE? Yes, but then it's dependent upon what you're doing. So I would say of the 50 people whose QWE I've confirmed so far, I have no stats on this, but my thinking is, my instinct is that the majority are in-house legal. And the majority are overseas, outside of the UK, but not necessarily the same people, so to speak. So I have confirmed the qualifying work experience of people overseas who've worked in law firms and other organizations, but yeah, definitely 1+8T. I'm sure that's not your name, but that's what your computer says. But it can definitely be qualifying work experience, but it then depends on what were you doing. Does it meet the criteria for being the provision of legal services? And that's why I do provide people with, offer a free, no obligation Zoom to go through the detail, because that's impossible. You can't say for everyone. They need to tell me, go through it with me to see whether I'm of that opinion. Right, what if your supervisor is leaving soon, SRA qualified lawyer? Can you get this signed off before they leave, before you take the SQE exams? Yes, you can get your QWE signed off before you take the SQE exams, definitely. Keep in touch with them. If you haven't yet got your 2 years, then it might be that or you're leaving before them, or whatever. You can reach out to someone who's no longer there and get them to confirm your qualifying work experience. Similarly, they could be the supervisor where you are getting an external, such as me, to confirm your qualifying work experience. It's not uncommon for me, indeed. It happened only this week. I was confirming I went through the work of a Jordanian paralegal whose supervisor has subsequently left and is working in the USA. So we were on a Zoom between the UK and Jordan going through his work. And then after that, he gave me the details of his supervisor, who I got feedback from, because that's what the SRA requires me to do as an external confirming solicitor. So I did that with her. What day are we today? So it was yesterday evening, and she was in the USA. No longer there, but she was his supervisor during the period of QWE. So yes, Nish. Kieran, is it true that a foreign qualified lawyer must gain experience in either the country of qualification or the law of England and Wales? No, not true. The foreign qualified lawyer needs to have experience, period. It could be anywhere, but it needs to be legal experience. And then obviously you need to get the letter of reference from the supervisor, but it doesn't need to be in the law of England and Wales. It does not need to be in the country of qualification. So someone's been misleading you there, I'm afraid, Kieran. Much more flexible than you might think. Hugo, would working within financial, legal and accounting regulation count as QWE? I think I've already answered that. It could, depends upon the nature of what you're doing, so long as it falls within the definition of QWE, the provision of legal services. Okay. AML within the legal sector, anti-money laundering, again, it depends whether you're interpreting and working with the law or whether it's purely administrative. But, in principle, yes. Okay, Kieran, in my case, I've been working in an intergovernmental organization since qualification, therefore not working in the US or the UK. Fine, absolutely. I'm just coming to the end of working with someone to confirm her qualifying work experience, which was gained in the UN. Not a problem, so long as it fits the definition. Divya, if my QWE was many years ago, then there's a long break. Will that still be considered as valid? Yes. So then it becomes a practical issue of, can you find the solicitor who was there in that organization to be able to ask them to confirm your qualifying work experience, or if you're reaching out to an external solicitor to do that for you, are you going to be able to find the work to show them and the supervisor for them to be able to get feedback from? So that's a practical issue. It's not a regulatory issue, Divya. Pamela, so the new qualifying route SQE, you don't require a training contract. Absolutely. The term training contract means nothing. It has no meaning at all within SQE. Law firms might want to call the QWE training contract. That's fine. They can call it sky blue pink. They can call it what they want. That's their internal name, but it doesn't mean anything with the SRA. It's qualifying work experience. Okay. Pamela, again, do you still need 2 years qualifying work experience with the new route? Yes, you do. 2 years full-time equivalent. Okay, so it does allow you to work part-time. You can get that outside of a law firm. It could be volunteering. So you could have picked this up along the way. You have, just to repeat myself, the ability to acquire this in up to 4, but no more than 4 placements. And it doesn't need to be done in English and Welsh law. It does not need to be done in a law firm. It does not need to be done in the UK. So a lot more flexible than you might think. Enoch, do firms consider candidates who qualify with self-study? Well, it's a question of passing the exam. If you self-study and pass the exam, great. The issue is whether you've passed the exam, how what training method you've used to actually get to passing the exam, I would have thought is irrelevant. If you're asking me, is it okay to self-study? I couldn't say. Now, by the way, there are lots of groups of people who who are trying to pass or qualify through the SQE route. Look out for them. There's a big one on LinkedIn. If I go to LinkedIn and groups called SQE, where are we going in here? Groups. There are lots of WhatsApp groups. So if you are, I've got too much stuff open here. Right, you can see up here SQE. So that's a big one that I'm a member of. But there are others as well. There's things on WhatsApp. So look out for those. If you're studying with an organization, it's likely that you will find other candidates who you can then form a group with or be invited to join a group. I'm sure there are groups on Facebook, on all sorts of platforms. So there you can ask questions about, about the exams, about the study material, from your peers. I can't answer those because I'm not taking the exam. I qualified back in 1992, so the LPC hadn't even been considered at that stage. Yeah, right. Anastasia, question from you. For SQE2, we need to provide evidence of our work. Do you mean SQE2 exemption application? Then the answer is no, unless you're filling paragraph 8 or section 8 of the application. So if you're filling in 7A, 7B or 7C, you don't need to provide evidence of the work, but the letter from the referee, which you'll probably draft for them, will need to have some examples, which of course they are then signing on their headed paper, so it's got to be true, and you're providing their certificate of good standing, which you would have, or they would have obtained from their local bar. But yeah, you don't need to be providing that information. If you're going for section 8, because you haven't yet got 2 years post-qualification experience, then you would need to provide documentation, I believe, and I would recommend that you redact the names to maintain anonymity there. Wow, we've gone over, well over an hour. I think we've run out of questions. You put me through the mill there. I hope that's been of help. I've got another one here. Mario, if a foreign qualified lawyer was working 1 year within his country of jurisdiction and 1 year in England as a paralegal, can she still apply for SQE2 exemption? Yes. The SRA doesn't care where it is. So 1 + 1 = 2. So then you can, it will probably be section 7B of that form down here that you would be filling in with the requirements that I've listed there, which you can read for yourself on the form and the SRA website as well. So don't overcomplicate it. If it says ABC, then don't do X, Y, Z, just do ABC, and that should be sufficient. Okay. The SRA are having to deal with huge issues of comparative law and what have you for people applying from all over the world. They're not going. They set the rules, and if you meet the rules, you should be okay. If you're saying, oh, well, I need to get English experience, if they're not asking for it, it's not going to make any difference. Post-qualification, professional legal experience. That is professional legal experience. There's no word English in there or Welsh in there. So stick to what it says in there. Right, we've still got 32 people who. Sorry? Are there any other questions that people want to pop into the chat into here? I'm afraid I can't provide places to go to for getting qualifying work experience. Where I come across them, I'll put them, I'll post about them on LinkedIn. Yeah, that's not our business. I do, as I said, help foreign qualified lawyers if they need help beyond the article in here with viewing and commenting and critiquing their, for example, draft application, a draft letter of reference. We do provide a service as an external confirming solicitor. If that's of interest, reach out to me and we'll organize schedule in a free, no obligation Zoom. Negative marketing. Artie, what do you mean by negative marketing? Or negative marking, not marketing. Do they? Oh, I can't answer you that, Artie. That really is a question for the training providers, because they're the people who would have that detailed knowledge. I'm not a training provider. I've got involved in this through doing exemption, the application, sorry, the QWE confirmation. The training provider is a completely different business. I know that the training providers I've spoken to, a lot of them have invested millions in getting together their training material. So that's their business. Okay, I've got people now going off mute. Doesn't help particularly. If you have a question, because we've still got 30+ people on here, pop it into the chat, and I'll do my best to answer it. Right, who's not on mute? Let me see. Okay, any further questions? No, we just got thank yous from people. Okay, so it's been a pleasure spending time with you. I hope that's been helpful. Yeah, look out for me and all my stuff on LinkedIn. What I will do is do a post probably tomorrow morning on LinkedIn with links to, or URLs to those pages on here, but you can go to the website hunningsconsultancy.co.uk to research this on here. It's very simple, just type it in and search for it. Good luck to you all. It's a brave new world, but this does, I think, make things much more simple than it used to be in the past. It gives you opportunities where you were blocked before. Okay. So, and if anyone does want to reach out for assistance, then please indeed do so. You've got the contact details. You've got either through LinkedIn or you've got our email address. There is a form. Someone's just joining us. They missed it. So there's a form on here. If I just minimize that, where you can put in information. You've got the email address there as well. So I wish you all good luck with on your journey, and if you discover some clarification from the SRA in some of these grey areas, then please let me know, and I can let the next group of people I train know and put something on the website as well. Lovely. Okay, thank you very much, and I'll stop sharing and wish you a good day.